So I'd like to officially welcome everyone to Climate Brain, making connections for big picture analysis and action. My name is Shelley Hayduck, and the featured big thinker is Dr. Mark Trexler, developer of the Climate Web. He's worked on climate change for almost 30 years, authored 2 books, published numerous papers. Hey, Mark, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks a lot.
And I'll also introduce Matt Caton. A lot of you know him from our 101s. Matt, our Director of Customer Solutions, will be hosting our Q&A that will be active. For those of you that just joined, we have a Q&A panel, and we will reserve a good 15 minutes to cover that. Now, just to kind of kick things off, a little background. Of course, Mark's going to go ahead and get started. So Matt, go ahead while I'm giving some background and throw the ball to Mark as far as sharing screen. And I'm going to let everyone know a little bit of kind of my thoughts on Climate Brain, Climate Web Brain. It's really the only knowledge solution that is responding to global warming from a multifaceted perspective. In terms of information, it's one of our largest topical public brains. It's got over 60,000 thoughts, 100,000 links, 11,000 documents, 15,000 URLs, totaling over 15 gigabytes in size. And as a personal note, I absolutely love Mark Trexler's notes, as you'll see. So there's a lot from like, how do we handle what Mark is going to describe as a wicked problem, a very complex, multifaceted problem, to just like very cool brain hacks, like how did you synthesize all this information? How do you get these wonderful graphics? So I think with that, I am going to hand it over to you, Mark, and we're going to go ahead and get started.
Okay, thanks, Shelley. So just to make one thing sort of clear in terms of what I'm covering today, I'm not trying to provide a course on climate change in terms of managing climate change. I'm really trying to talk about how the brain can be used to tackle really complicated problems using climate change, using the climate web as a case study in doing that. We can certainly get into any climate related questions that people want, but I really am trying to tie it into the bigger questions around how people can be using the brain, which I've been using for more than 15 years, and continue to think that it's just a great tool for tackling these kinds of problems. So let me go ahead and just jump over to a thought that I've used just to organize the talk, and I'll be sort of jumping back and forth for between the different points, the different notes that are here, because they're all links to other thoughts. And so the front page, this is where you go if you go to theclimateweb.org. This is the front door into the climate web, and from here, as Shelley said, you can go literally to a couple 100,000 places. So it is a massive knowledge base sort of sitting behind this front door. Before getting, well, so there are 4 real steps for managing knowledge around wicked problems. And Einstein has a great quote that if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. I love that quote. We don't do that nearly enough. And for solving difficult societal problems, that's actually what we need to be doing. And so the idea of then using knowledge management to tackle these problems, I would sort of suggest 4 different steps. One is you've got to curate information, and there's a virtually infinite amount of that information out there. You need to make it possible to navigate that information for the problem. You need to think about how do you go from information to knowledge, and then lastly, how do you go from knowledge to actionable knowledge? How do you help people find the information that they can actually use for making progress on, in this case, a problem like climate change? Before getting into sort of using the brain for wicked problem solving or complicated problem solving, I think it is worthwhile just to juxtapose this to using the brain for just personal knowledge management. And so I've just jumped here to my own personal brain. Also, it has my professional brain. Into this brain, I can dump literally anything I want because I know I'll be able to find it later. And so, there's the household brain with all the home inventory and photos, etc. There's my personal brain with just tons of stuff. My professional brain, which includes, for example, all the presentations that I've ever given, all the papers that I've ever written, all the blogs that I've ever written. And what I find sort of fascinating about this is that when I go in and look for something, I'm about to write something new about a topic, I will invariably find that I've already written it, but I had forgotten about it entirely. But because it's in my personal brain, that, so to speak, jogs my memory, and I don't have to rewrite the same pieces that I may have already written several times before. So, working with your own brain using the software, you don't have to worry at all about how do you help people navigate it, how do you go from knowledge to actionable knowledge. And this is probably how most people use the brain. And I just want to emphasize how easy it is to use the brain this way, as compared to trying to design a brain that is intended to help other people, not just me, but other people understand a wicked problem and tackle that wicked problem. So jumping back into this presentation, there are sort of a couple of key ideas behind thinking about knowledge management. These, again, I like quotes. There are hundreds of quotes in the climate web relating to all kinds of relevant stuff. But Woodrow Wilson has just a great quote: "There is no idea in our heads that has not been worn shiny by someone else's brain." And that's why knowledge management can help, because other people have inevitably thought about virtually anything that we might be interested in thinking about. And wouldn't it be great if we could take advantage of that information as opposed to all of us having to reinvent our own wheels? Carla Odell, who's one of the mothers of the field of knowledge management, has a great quote: "If only we knew what we know." And I'm personally convinced that if we knew what we know and sort of we all were able to act on that, we would solve problems like climate change. It's just that, each of us can only have such a fractional understanding of our collective knowledge, and we normally don't look for ways to share that in constructive ways. And so we end up not making the progress that we would like to be making. And information overload, certainly in the climate change space, one reason you need knowledge management is the information overload issue. I'm talking to a senior person in this field a number of years ago about this whole idea, and his response was, "I know everything I need to know. Why do I need knowledge management?" And the idea that in today's world, all you need to know about almost any topic seems a little odd to me. And so in this case, I'm just going to show you by example. Just here are some of the reports and studies and books, et cetera, that we have added to the climate web in 2023, right? So there will be hundreds of new reports, new documents, new articles, new books that come out during the course of 2023 that we will be adding to the climate web, not to mention the videos and the news stories, et cetera. So, information deluge really is a problem in trying to get your head around something like climate change. And that's one of the things that we're trying to tackle here. And step one in doing that is thinking about, okay, let's start by building the equivalent of a file cabinet for the problem that you're dealing with. And so what I'm going to show you is how we do that in terms of these are sources headings, and I'll show you the color pattern in just a second for lots of the different things that we have. But this is basically the library in the climate web having to do with carbon pricing, which is one of the huge topics when it comes to solving climate change. These are all subsidiary headings, so each of these have libraries in their own right. You know, carbon pricing in the electricity sector, evaluating carbon pricing, impacts of carbon pricing. It goes on and on. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of sources here. And so this is how we start. We have collected something like 20 to 25,000 documents that are in the climate web. They're organized this way so that you can topically get your head around the issues. The second way that we do it is we then add other stuff. So for example, I'm going to show you what we do with news and opinion, which is very similar. But we also we organize videos, quotes, cartoons, websites. I'm not going to show you all that stuff. Just know that all of those kinds of materials are organized in the same topical heading kind of way. So here you can come to carbon pricing, news and opinion. These are all the subcategories. These are all the different news stories that, you know, in my desktop version of TheBrain open up instantly in TheBrain itself, so I can quickly survey a ton of stuff. And we go back, you know, 7-8 years in a lot of cases for these kinds of materials. So this is the filing cabinet aspect to the climate web, or I think any wicked problem brain. And one way that we try and make it easy to navigate is by using different types. I just showed you 2 different types that we use, one for news and opinion, which was brown, one for sources, sort of aquamarine. You can see in this slide that there are a lot more types that we have. So you can instantly tell what is an index entry, what is a sources heading, what is a networking heading, individual videos, individual graphics. We have little icons for each of these things and different types that very quickly tell you what you're looking at. And so it's a useful way of sort of organizing this mass of stuff so you can instantly recognize what it is that you're looking at any given time. So that's how we use types. There are other ways to use types in TheBrain. This is how we do them to help you quickly know what you're looking at any given time. There are several ways to sort of navigate a brain normally that anyone can do, and I just sort of threw them into a thought here just to be able to easily pull them up. One can search, powerful search function. You can use the types, tags, which I'll be showing you in just a second in terms of dashboards. You can run sophisticated reports in the desktop version of the software. You can use one-way links in very interesting ways to point people to this. This is where sort of the actionable knowledge stuff comes in. How do you help people find what they're going to be most interested in? And one-way links are a way of helping to do that. I'll also be showing you a little later in the web client itself some new innovations, the no plex view, so that you don't have to be distracted by the plex if you don't want to be. And I'll demonstrate a very short tour feature, which was just added very recently and makes all kinds of things possible for helping walk people through a particular topic or issue. And so again, from a knowledge management, from a teaching, from a communications perspective, huge advancements that we've seen in the online brain software that really do facilitate what we're trying to accomplish here with wicked problem knowledge management. So the next step in sort of curating all of this stuff is, how do you help people find it? So, yes, there's stuff in there on carbon pricing, there's stuff in there on literally hundreds of topics. How do we help people sort of find the information on the topics that they're looking for? And what I'm showing you here is a couple of different things. First of all, I'm showing you an index entry. So all of these are index entries. higher level index entries, so business sectors, deep dive. If I click on that, then you see that you can jump into any of these different business sectors and then go down in from there. But if I just jump back to where I was a second ago with the aviation sector, you can jump down into aviation emissions, aviation sector carbon offsets, sustainable aviation fuels, et cetera, et cetera. We have about 3,500 of these index entries organizing sort of these 200,000 thoughts and 400,000 links, whatever. So all of that is organized via this index that is hierarchical. So you can just go up in the index, you can come down in the index, you can literally click your way through the entire topic of climate change. And what we do then is we jump to the individual categories of information here off to the left. So you can jump to the sources for the aviation sector, news and opinion, networking, videos, extracted materials, which I'll show you in a second. So all of that stuff is off to the left of the index entries, but it makes it very easy to orient yourself and to find what you're looking for. And because with the index entries, we use an I colon and we don't have any spaces, it makes it very easy to search the index to pretty quickly find that part of the knowledge base that you're looking for. You don't have to put in carbon pricing and get 1,000 results. You can put in I colon carbon pricing and get right to the index entry for carbon pricing. And from there, you can jump off to all the other knowledge. But what we also do with these index entries on the right-hand side is we use them to sort of provide an overview of the topic. So there's some summary information here about aviation and climate change, some key graphics as to why there is concern about aviation in terms of rapidly rising emissions and the implications for climate change, but then also, and how planes emit emissions. And you can put anything you want into these notes fields. And so we use the notes fields as a way of introducing the topic to the user. So we don't just say, hey, here's the index entry, here's a ton of information linked off to the left. We make it easy to sort of work your way into the topic by having curated information here in the notes field. Let me just go back to where I was. And let's see. Oh, and insights pages, another way of doing that. So let me just show you one of hundreds of insights pages using carbon pricing as an example. So these insights pages, again, they have their own icon, so you know that you're looking at a little at an insights page. But here again, in one page, we sort of try and provide what you need to know, or what anyone trying to come up to speed on the idea of carbon pricing, what do they need to know in one page? And that's what you can find here in this insights page, and you can do that for hundreds of climate related topics. And this is all stuff that we've curated. We are starting to use AI a little bit to make it a little faster for us, but it's all vetted and it's all curated. So to go into the next step, how do you get from knowledge, which hopefully I've been showing sort of a little bit of the knowledge side, how do you get to actionable knowledge? One way to think about that is to think about the climate web as literally, 150,000 climate knowledge Lego blocks. So every report, every news story, every graphic that we've extracted, every video, all of those things are knowledge blocks that you can then combine. And I think, the Lego analogy here is a great one, because we can build thousands of these climate knowledge kits to help explore specific questions. And the one advantage they have over normal Legos is that you can use exactly the same block in lots of different kits simultaneously, which obviously you can't do with the physical Legos. But let me show you how we actually do this for in a couple of specific cases. So here, for example, is one of the great videos around climate change, or relevant to climate change. Jonathan Haidt, sociologist, Harvard, has a great video. Jonathan Haidt explains our contentious culture. You can see here that it's linked to various video collections, so everything is linked, and you can come to things through all kinds of means. But we've gone through the video and sort of pulled out what were the key points that he was making in this video. And then those points can be organized for other purposes to try and explore specific questions. And so that's sort of the idea of creating these Legos. And I wanted to show you this more simple version before I show you a slightly bigger one, taking the idea of Legos to the next level. This is from the 2020 book by Mark Linus about sort of our final warning, 6 degrees of climate emergency. And let me just click here so you can sort of see, and it goes, I can shrink the text, and you'll see that we've taken literally hundreds of things out of this book. Little factoids that have their own little icon here, dates that he talks about, the implications of 1 degree. It's a great book because it's so full of factoids that you would otherwise forget about 2 days later. But we've extracted those factoids. What happens at 1 degree? What happens at 1.5 degrees? What happens at 2 degrees of climate change? What happens at 3, 4, 5? It keeps going, obviously. And then those are building blocks that we can use in all kinds of other ways to help people explore particular topics. And so that's the idea behind the thinking of this as a huge Legos collection. And so how do we then use all those Legos? Well, the first thing we do is simply organize them under their own topical heading. So E stands for extracted materials. And so these all represent graphics that we've extracted, ideas that we've extracted from different reports. We literally have gone through and by hand extracted thousands and thousands of ideas, of graphics, of infographics, all kinds of stuff. So here they're simply thrown into this bin, so to speak, under extracted materials, carbon pricing. But then we can take those and turn them using the tags feature into more specific dashboards. And that's what I'm going to show you next. And then we'll take sort of a short a Q&A break. Let me just show you 3 of the ways that we try and help turn sort of this mass of stuff into actionable knowledge for very specific topics. So for example, let's say you're really interested in the question of what level of carbon pricing would be required to hit the global target of 1.5 degrees. So we've built this tag, and you can tell by the little tag icon, but we've linked to this tag the key index entries, the key topical headings, the key sources, key insights pages, key news and opinion, key graphics and ideas, and potentially websites. So this is, if you spend an hour going through this dashboard for this particular question, you will get 50 times the return than just starting to try and explore all this with a Google search. So this is stuff that's pulled from all over the larger knowledge base to help explore specific questions. Let me show you a very different kind of knowledge kit, so to speak. This is a chronology of what has happened in the oil and gas sector since the 1960s. What has the oil and gas sector said about climate change? What have the different CEOs said about climate change? When did investors start expressing concern about the oil and gas sector? So you can literally see a chronology here very quickly that we can add to at any time, and we've got lots of these different chronologies to explore a topic like the oil sector and climate change very straightforwardly. Again, through the fact that we've been able to extract all of these individual building blocks, and then we can simply link them into a dashboard. And I'm going to show you just one last example of a knowledge kit. If you think about, for example, sea level rise and real estate risk, huge issue, trillions of dollars at stake. And so here you can come in, oh, there's an index entry, or here's the literature, here's news and opinion, here are the extracted materials. And again, it's the same thing. Here's some insights pages, here's some of the best reports, some of the best news stories, the best websites, the best visualizations. It's all organized under this dashboard, which is a tag, one of the most powerful features in the Brain software. And we probably have about 750 of these dashboards in the Climate Web that can help you explore almost any aspect of the topic, and we add new ones all the time. Let me do, oh, sorry, didn't mean to do that. To also though show how one can step back from this for a second to make sense of it all, as opposed to, yes, you can dig very deep into almost any of these topics, but we also, and this is available in the open access section of the Climate Web, you can come in and you can explore, okay, why is climate change a wicked problem? What do we know and what do we not know about this issue? What does the future look like? And all of these things have child thoughts and information in the notes. I'm not going to go through it all. I'm just trying to illustrate that you can come in and explore the economics of climate change, the risks of climate change, the 30 years of the business and climate change conversation. What would success look like? What are all the different solutions to climate change? And then you can go in and explore dozens and dozens and dozens of different solutions that people are talking about. So that's another way that we've organized information, is saying, okay, I just want a big picture view. How do I make sense of this massive challenge? And so you can organize information in an infinite number of ways. And last, before a little break, one thing that we've done is, because different people need different things. Journalists might be looking for one thing, teachers might be looking for another, activists might be looking for another. So you can come in and we can suggest to you what are different places in the Climate Web, what are some of the different insights pages, what are some of the different dashboards, what is it that you might be, as a journalist, most interested in taking a look at? And we have this for a bunch of different potential audiences, again, all with the goal of making it easier for people to explore the topic of climate change and come up the learning curve. So that's sort of my introduction to this knowledge base for a wicked problem. And we'll stop there for a minute to see if there are any questions, Shelley, that people want to pose before showing a little bit more of the web client and the AI feature, and see, and then we'll have some more Q&A.
Sure, yes, we do have a number of questions, and thank you for kind of getting us going. The first question that a lot of people had was, how can I navigate this? So I don't know if you want to put, I did put the link in the chat. The easiest way is probably just to go to our homepage, click on our ad, and then at the bottom we have a link right off our page, but we do have the direct link to TheBrain, but this is available as a URL. Some of our attendees are actually clicking along, and we will also send that link to you. And let's just get into the Q&A. First of all, there was a lot of questions about how big this brain was and how it is and how it got started. So why don't you go ahead? I rattled off some statistics at the beginning of the webinar, but if you could give people a sense of size and scope of this brain, that would be great. And then related to that, somebody else asked, do you employ people to create this brain? Is it just yourself, or do you have a team? So size and a size of authoring team as well.
This brain actually dates back to a big business conference that I was at in New York City quite a few years ago, where I did an event with Vice President Al Gore as part of that conference. But I saw a very interesting presentation about how human beings make decisions. And I realized I'd already been a consultant in this space for quite a while, but I realized that as a consultant, I tended to go in and tell people the answer to things and how they should do things. That's not how we learn. We learn by exploring, we learn by being able to figure out, does this really matter to us? What are our options, et cetera? And I'd been using the brain personally for quite a while at that point, but that day I realized that I wanted to build a brain specifically for tackling climate change that would have sort of everything in it that anybody would need to come up to speed and to understand why climate change is really a big problem. So that was 12 years ago or so. There are really only 2 of us that work in it. We do have interns that help us. We're always looking for interns to help in terms of process and curate information. But it's basically 2 of us that we've spent about 25,000 hours building the Climate Web over that period of time. And yeah, it does have 25,000 documents, most of which you can read or download from the Climate Web. 35,000 news stories, 5,000 websites, 3,000 videos, 15,000 extracted graphics and ideas, cartoons, quotes. Every time we see something interesting in our LinkedIn feeds or any place, we stick it into the Climate Web, which then makes it very easy, generally speaking, to find again.
Great. And Robert is asking, are you writing the notes within the brain or different ways? So just a general question on notes.
Yeah, no, these are all built within the brain, and you can bring stuff in and you can add links to external links or internal links to other thoughts in the brain. It's just another way of helping people navigate without creating. If I can put 15 links in the notes field, instead of having to have 15 thoughts, child thoughts in the Plex here, it tends to make the Climate Web less frightening to people, and that has been sort of an issue. People do get frightened by the sheer scope and size, which is why we really try and make it easy for people to come in and explore it without being overwhelmed, even though there's infinite stuff in there, but we don't need to show you all of it at the beginning.
Right, and we also do have the new the alternative views that are text only. And one of the things I actually love about Mark's brains is he's got so many hyperlinks and backlinks in his notes. A lot of people, when they first start the brain, they get so focused on the Plex, which is our visual display. What you're seeing to the left is you don't realize how powerful the notes editor is. And in fact, if you just wanted to do a Plex only navigation or notes only navigation, more conventional site like, you absolutely can do that in our new web client. Now we have a lot more questions. So John, let's get back to questions. Wanted to know, are the linked documents actually stored within the brain, or is the brain just pointers to external documents?
We at one point had the linked documents in the brain. The brain got up to about 60 gigabytes in size, which was a little inconvenient. So we have actually moved most of the documents into the cloud. They actually start to, let me just go to Yes, carbon price for a second. Let me just, where the carbon pricing that I was at is calling up one of the sources headings here. So carbon pricing as a business risk. And so now I'm just, I've clicked on this particular thought, and it is being downloaded now from the cloud. So here it is. I can read the document right here. I can download the document, and you can too if you want. So it's not just pointing to web links where the documents are, because one of the things we found early on was that especially with reports, the links break very frequently. So 3 months after a report is published, that report has disappeared. And the link is broken. So that's why we started bringing in all of these documents, not paywalled stuff, but 25,000 documents you can actually access, read, download in the Climate Web itself.
All right, great. And then another question on organization from Michelle. How do you differentiate the use of tags and internal links? And maybe I'll add to that, kind of what are some of your favorite thought types? We've talked a lot about notes, and people are seeing your different icons that you're using for tags and types. Maybe a quick focus and review on, because you've got a lot of information, and the tags and types are obviously very helpful to providing that extra data schema to go through this information. So maybe a little bit of insight onto how they came to be, which ones you find most useful, and kind of how you recommend people use this particular feature of the brain.
Yeah, and the two are very different. So just for example, we have types for different sources by year, so that then I can run a report for a particular year and navigate very quickly. So if I just click on 2014 sources, that brings up all the sources from 2014, and so that's one way that we use types. But we have lots of different. We have more than 100 types. So if I come down here, quotes collections. So here are all the different quotes collections, and then if I click on that, then you come to the individual quotes, and we have a lot of slides and graphics, etc. So that's the types feature, and then the tags tends to be more specific questions. So carbon pricing for 1.5 degrees, or a global carbon price, or carbon pricing entry points, carbon pricing core library. All of these use the tag feature. And again, so if they then click on topical core libraries, here are some of the different core libraries, so for individual action. And we have about 750 of these tags, each of them individually built, but it's a very good way, because not all of these thoughts, the tag uses virtual links, so it's not physically linked. So if I click on this document, for example, you can see the physical links to the sources collections that it's part of, but it's not physically linked to the tag, so that it just helps keep things a lot simpler than if everything were physically linked to everything else. It would just be a very confusing visual maelstrom.
All right, and I know we have a little bit, might have a bit of this covered, but I'm just going to acknowledge KJ's question. Do you see a trained AI model of the brain as the next step in managing all this information?
And maybe that's a good way to jump into the sort of the wrapping up section.
Yeah, and then there are more questions, and I see them, and we'll get to them, but I thought I'd throw that one out because I know we were going to cover that a bit, because a lot of our users in general, are interested in, integrating a piece or maybe some AI in addition to their own thoughts. So right. Yeah, love to hear your views on AI. Yeah, so right. Why don't we take a pause on, and Matt and I are in the Q&A, and we'll leave that as our last question for midway, and get you back into the presentation, and you can answer, talk a little bit about, where you think the AI component may or may not come into the Climate Web brain.
Yeah, sounds good. So let me jump over to to the Climate Web online. And so this is the web client version of the Climate Web, which, as you can see, looks very similar to the desktop version. And so you can come in here and you can quickly navigate through the pins collection. You can see all the types and see all the tags, although it doesn't really help you that much. I don't recommend that you get overwhelmed by types and tags. There's a powerful search feature, which, by the way, is where the little AI button is in the new browser, which I'm not going to demonstrate it because TheBrain will be demonstrating that in a lot more detail in your own webinars. But what I wanted to show here was something that's called the tour feature, which is a brand new feature of TheBrain. And so in this case, if I come over here, you can, I don't know if I'm seeing my go-to webinar thing, but there's a little arrow in the upper right, and I can click on that, and that goes to the next thought that I've automatically linked for purposes of the tour. And what I wanted to show here was that, so this links to something called Climate Web enabled ebooks. By the way, you can have little GIFs in the notes field that are, well, they're not interactive, but they move, which is sort of cool. In this case, infinite information versus actionable knowledge is a
that is a cute GIF. I was just thinking that
is a tightrope kind of issue, and we have a lot of those. And then I'm going to click, because the tour goes directly to a particular ebook. This has to do with climate chess. Climate chess is how we think about how we could actually make progress on climate change. We have team urgency versus team no urgency. The problem is that team urgency doesn't really know it's playing the game. Team no urgency does, and team no urgency has been winning the game for decades. But what I wanted to show here, the reason I did this is sort of the conventional view, much like the desktop view that you saw. But as Shelley mentioned, there are now new features in the web client. I can come up and click on this eye, for lack of a better word, and suddenly the plex, which a lot of people find disconcerting and frightening, the plex with squiggles, etc., it disappears entirely. So now you simply see the notes field. All of the links that were in the plex are still here. So you can click on the introduction, and then you'll see that you've got sort of the organization of the ebook is right here, and you can literally just click your way through the ebook without ever seeing the plex and without ever being disconcerted by the plex. In a sense, the Climate Web had just turned into a 150,000 page website, and for some purposes that's really cool. And organizing information into this kind of an ebook idea is just another way of helping to deliver actionable knowledge. And you can go forward. One of the nice things about the tour is you can do anything you want in the tour, but you can simply pick up where you left off in the tour at any point, and it will remember what the next thought is. So the tour feature, we're going to start using it a lot in the Climate Web. Instead of just dumping people into a dashboard with 75 thoughts, we'll build actual tours to help people walk through questions like carbon pricing for a 1.5 degree target. So let me jump to AI for a second, and for that I'm going to jump back out to a separate little brain, because what I did was, using the AI feature in the brain, I created sort of a mini climate change brain. And I think I asked ChatGPT a couple of questions. What are some of the potential problems in doing this? And it gave some good answers. ChatGPT can generate fluent and elegant prose, but it can also seem incredibly dumb, even dangerous. It gets math wrong, fails to give the most basic cooking instructions, displays shocking biases. So this is ChatGPT talking about itself. Not a substitute for human expertise. And so what I wanted to show was just a quick example of what tends to happen or what happened when I was playing with it, and why AI is not ready for prime time in terms of creating actionable climate knowledge. So when I put in, please build me a brain, it gave me global warming and impacts of climate change, which is a little odd because global warming is climate change. And but let's just go ahead and keep going. It threw in several child thoughts, causes of global warming, climate models and predictions, consequences of global warming. That's all fine. If I click on causes of global warming, it was interesting because it does have burning of fossil fuels, anthropogenic causes, agriculture and livestock farming. So it's pulling a lot of the right words off of, basically an internet search. What was interesting is that when you go into the anthropogenic causes, and I have this up here in the notes field, it talks about what's causing greenhouse gas emissions. It's not talking about the real underlying causes of those emissions in terms of short-termism and economic discounting, cognitive biases, political systems. Those are really the causes of climate change, as opposed to greenhouse gas emissions per se. And unless you knew that, and you have to understand that for tackling a wicked problem, you have to, as Einstein said, you need to spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem before you start thinking about the solution. And so ChatGPT has trouble sort of getting to that second and third order of stuff, because it doesn't, as you well know, it doesn't actually understand the topic. And so you've got to be careful in thinking about that. But you can come in here and say, under climate models and predictions, it gives you climate sensitivity, IPCC report. Interestingly, it did not give catastrophic climate change as a topic. And so I added that and then asked it to add more information about catastrophic climate change. And it gives a lot of different implications of climate change, not necessarily anything having to do with catastrophes. But when I asked ChatGPT, could you please explain to me why we should be concerned about catastrophic climate change, it gave a great answer. And so there's a trick to using this in this kind of purpose, as you can't really expect it to get its head around a massive wicked problem, but you can ask it to get its head around a specific topic and to provide some very good information and insight that obviously you need to check. But one way that we're using this now, let me jump back into the Climate Web desktop for just a second. One way we're using this, let me just make sure I didn't miss anything, sorry. Yeah, okay. We're using this in Hot Topics, and Hot Topics is a new feature in the Climate Web because there's tons of data in here, there's tons of information, but how can you sort of come up to speed on the latest conversations around climate change? And what we're doing is we're asking ChatGPT to write short summaries of the basic topics and then pasting them in here. So for example, the fingerprint of climate change, this was written by ChatGPT, and it's just a very nice short summary. But what we're then doing is we're using a resource that turns out to be very good for this, but is not that easy to use, which is LinkedIn. Most of you are probably on LinkedIn, but you can come in here, and what we're doing is we are copying. So if I click on climate litigation, for example, a nice little summary of the issue of climate litigation from ChatGPT, but then climate litigation and stock prices. What are the implications of climate litigation for company stock prices? It turns out that Joanna Setzer read a report and wrote a very nice summary, because a lot of people spend a lot of time putting very good content into LinkedIn that then just disappears, that you never really see again. And so what we're doing is we're going through, we're doing a screenshot of particularly good content. We have the link so you can jump to the whole thread and read all the comments, et cetera, et cetera. But we're using these screenshots to help people explore just very quickly what some of the hot topics are in this space. And so just by reading through some of these LinkedIn posts, you can quickly get a sense of what's being talked about. And there are lots of hot topics. This links to the story that was originally being discussed, and happens to be Financial Times, so it's behind a paywall, unfortunately. But then you can see that that's linked to litigation and liability news, and so then you can go to that. And so it's all part of this very large knowledge web that is sort of uniquely explorable based on how the brain works. Another sort of interesting thing that we are doing is nothing like this can ever be complete by definition. And so one of the things that we've done is we've brought in search terms. So here, let's see, corporate greenwashing, just as an example. We've tested lots of different search terms. So you can instantly call up what Wikipedia has to say about these things. But then you can also say, okay, I want to search in Google for how to avoid greenwashing, and that populates instantly. Or what about YouTube videos on greenwashing, and those pop up instantly. And so it's a way of pre-populating search terms and search topics that allow you to find stuff that might not be in the existing knowledge base. So we have several thousand of these search terms that you can use for just navigating the entire topic. It's one more way of helping people navigate to what they might be most interested in. So, reminding ourselves of the 4 things that we started out saying we needed to be able to accomplish: curating information, making it possible to navigate it, thinking about how do you go from information to knowledge, and from knowledge to actionable knowledge, and to just sort of say why the brain software for this purpose. This is another one, great quote from E.O. Wilson, the late E.O. Wilson, unfortunately. We're drowning in information, we're starving for wisdom. The world needs synthesizers, people able to pull together the right information at the right time, think critically about it, and make important choices wisely. And the brain is simply, still a unique combination of ease of use and power for accomplishing those things. So there are lots of knowledge management tools out there, great tools. But I showed you my personal brain, where I can literally dump in anything into it and know that I can find it instantly later. I think that everyone starting in high school should be starting to do that, and certainly in college. I think that knowledge management is the single skill set that we never learn about at any point. And that's unfortunate, because the problems we're trying to solve are getting more and more complicated. The brain makes it possible through the search function, through types, one-way links, et cetera, to navigate information in unique ways, and then you can organize that information, in our case with sort of climate knowledge Lego bricks, and you can build an infinite number of climate Lego kits with information in the brain. And then you can take all of this stuff in the topical dashboards or in ebooks to try and help people find what is really of most relevance to them. And that's the whole idea of actionable knowledge. So, yes, if you start building a brain, it's not going to be useful to you the next day. I think in my case, 6 months later, you say, this is why I started building a brain. Because now I'm seeing the value, and by the time you've had it for 10 years, in my case, in my personal brain, I like to say, and it's true, that if I lost my personal brain, and the copies that are in safe deposit boxes, et cetera, retirement or harakiri would really be the only options, because it has everything that I need access to in my personal and in my professional life. And so being able to do that on the one hand and tackle a wicked problem like climate change on the other is just helps illustrate the flexibility of this software. So we've barely scratched the surface of the climate web, of wicked problems, of knowledge management. There's lots of other stuff in here. You can go to theclimateweb.com, which is our website sort of describing the climate web. You can go right into the climate web itself at theclimateweb.org. There's a lot of open access content. There's also premium access content for people that want to dig deeper, but there's a lot you can do with the open access content. And so let me shut up, and we can come back into as much Q&A as people want to cover.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the presentation. We have a number of questions. And first of all, just a lot of compliments on the scope, the size, the ambition of TheBrain. You also have a volunteer for an intern
yes.
on Climate Web. So just on another note, there's a little bit of back and forth on that. And
I'm glad that Mark,
people...
yeah, I'm glad that Mark mentioned premium access, because a lot of people were mentioning, is this all available? Is there more? We will be sharing not only a recording of today's webinar, all attendees will receive that tomorrow, but more information about how to get in touch with Mark to view and navigate through the publicly accessible climate web, and how to gain premium access. You can see Mark's navigated over the premium access area of his brain as well. So there are many different avenues, as I understand it, to receive more information from the climate web, Mark.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of intrigue and positive feedback. A lot of people love the idea of the Lego kit. So maybe we can just kind of review what the Lego kit is and how you came up with that idea. That generated a bit of questions on the panel.
Yeah, well, let me see, where is my Lego image here? Navigator. Go for here we are. Yeah, I started using, or we started using the Lego analogy a number of years ago. And we do put at the very top, Lego is a trademark of the Lego Group. We are not, blah, blah, blah. That's what Lego requires that one says. But it really is this idea of being able to create hundreds of thousands of building blocks, and then being able to turn those into simple structures, into massively complicated structures. It is a perfect analogy, and because we've broken down so many reports and pulled out those building blocks that we can then combine in all kinds of ways, it is a great analogy.
Cool. And then Cyprin says, love the E.O. Wilson quote, would love the wink, and also asking, what is the AI feature of TheBrain? The speaker mentioned a quick Google search is nothing. So I'll just mention that is a new feature. In a way, we're kind of previewing it on this webinar. Tomorrow, if you really want to dive into it, we do have our 101 class, and I imagine Matt will be inundated with how do I get to AI, but just real quick,
yeah.
You go, it's only on the online version so far, but so you log into your online brain and it's right there. And let's just get back to that topic, because there was a lot of questions. I really kind of appreciated, myself personally, the way Dr. Mark Trexler handled that. Like, obviously, just in general as a society, our brains are still relevant, but AI is a nice tool. So I like to think of it as just an extra data source. So for those of you who want to play with it, or maybe don't know how to start your brain, you could use AI to generate a basic structure and notes. But then the cool thing is, yourself, as you know, in your daily life, are not replaced by AI. Your thought and your opinions are what count. So kind of combining that, and taking the best of both worlds. And that's why I really appreciated kind of how the way Mark talks about now. Now we may have other users who have fully generated AI brains, and that may be where we're going, and that's totally cool too. But what I appreciate is the more nuanced approach to AI. Yes, it is available in the brain. Is something you're welcome to use completely or just in parts of your brain to get started. It's great sometimes for brainstorming when you have like writer's block. So these are some applications. So in terms of where AI is going, obviously if you have expertise, there'll be parts where you could possibly think of it as an extra intern, to your brain, an assistant that might help you with your thoughts. But we can also send out more information on how to get to it, and again, join us for 101 tomorrow. We'll do a webinar on that, but I just wanted to kind of cover that because a lot of people were like, wow, I didn't know we had this feature. It just came out. Yes,
and it's important to point out also, we're not getting into the nuances of how it works. Yeah. It's very flexible, and when you create data, you are given the opportunity to deny that data, preview it, deny it, grant it, like keep the data that it provides for you, or try again. To get the sort of the AI thinking in the direction that you want to go. Very, very flexible, but yes, as Shelley mentioned, we'll get into the nitty gritty in an upcoming webinar on AI as well.
And then back to the climate web brain, there was another question, Mark, that came in about just dealing with copyright and different data sources, and how do you deal with that? And then just in terms of kind of our answer, we do have a number of institutional organizations that they use a variety of sources. So if you're creating a brain and you want to publish it and you're worried about copyright, then you can always just do the link. Like for instance, I created a brain with links to stuff in Washington Post, and so if you have your subscription to Washington Post, you'll be able to read the full article. If not, then you won't. So that's kind of one workaround. I know a lot of educational organizations sometimes will put their stuff behind firewalls and do it that way. So there are a number of ways if you're integrating a wide variety of sources. And maybe Mark, you can speak to that point, or where kind of where your third-party sources are coming from, or how you're dealing with any type of copyright issues, if that even is an issue for you. I'm not sure.
Oh, it's absolutely an issue. The basic way that we're framing it is, number one, we're saying if anybody has a problem with something we've done with their copyrighted material, please let us know. But basically anything that anyone can find on the internet, we basically say, well, that's fair game. If it's behind a paywall, we will not provide a copy, even if we have a copy. We won't provide a copy of that article if it's behind a paywall, because that would be violating copyright. But most stuff is not behind paywalls, and so if we have links to the Financial Times, you're absolutely right. The article won't show up unless you're able to log in with your Financial Times membership. But a slightly more interesting case is where we extract information from books and reports, and we extract thousands of graphics, et cetera. And could somebody say, well, you shouldn't be extracting all that stuff because it's copyrighted material? And if somebody wants to have a problem with that and tell us not to do it, okay, we'll take that report out. We're trying to solve a wicked problem, and to say that because of copyright, no one should ever be able to understand the problem of climate change, that's just sort of silly. And I don't think any lawyer would actually try and enforce that. So we are careful about it, but we basically take maximum advantage of the fair use principle under copyright law.
Yeah, that's what I was. It's great when somebody does get their publication in your brain. It's almost like a compliment, because it's a trusted source of knowledge on that particular topic. But the brain is a great aggregator for multiple sources, and that's kind of speaking to the point that one source might be Chat GPT, another source might be CNN, Washington Post, research hubs, and that's the power of information aggregation and knowledge management, taking all those perspectives and integrating them and bringing them together to enrich our own views, actually. And Michelle actually just wrote in, this is a very inspirational example of how to use the brain and synthesize knowledge in order to take action on wicked problems. I will be paying it forward. Great, thanks. So just a lot of compliments. And then we had some questions earlier about how, Matt, was there a question on import and search?
Yeah,
or I got it. I see.
You know, how the data got into your brain. Was it thought by thought? You've talked about, you know, working with a team over the years, and it's been years in the making of this brain. Was there ever any importing that was done? And we do have import options, file and folder directories, properly formatted Excel spreadsheets, and tab delineated outlines. Those can be imported into the brain. But the real question is, did you utilize any of those for the creation of the Climate Web?
Right, and most people, you know, the first question that we almost always get is, you know, is this being populated by bots that are running around the internet at night, grabbing stuff? And the answer to that is no. Primarily just because you would get the same chaos. You know, if you Google any climate topic, you'll get 55 million hits at least, and that's just not very helpful. And so bringing all of that stuff in via bots, even if it were possible, wouldn't be that helpful. Our whole goal here is to curate and to try and get to actionable knowledge. So for better or worse, every single one of the 200,000 thoughts are thoughts that we've created. And all of the text is text that we've created. Every news story is something that we've added. There are some ways that the brain makes that easy with something called Brain Box. So when I go through LinkedIn, I add stuff to the Brain Box and then automatically can add it into the brain. But no, it's all, it literally, for better or for worse, it's literally curated thought by thought.
There was a question earlier if Mark was using Brain Box. I'm glad you mentioned it. And yeah, this theme of curated knowledge, it's definitely bubbling up, and that is something that you can really see in terms of the level of depth and the analysis going into Climate Web. Because yes, you can do that Google search, but the synthesis and sort of the gestalt, the big picture of how it all comes together is really quite impressive in this brain. And Mark, there was a question earlier about your process of choosing articles. Do you have certain sources? I'm assuming you do, that you trust more than others. Are you writing most of the pieces yourself? How do you decide what gets into the brain, and also to what gets left out? Maybe there were a few articles related but not quite on the topic, so you made some editorial choices to not put them in the brain, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. One, people ask, well, do you have climate doubt stuff and climate denial stuff? And we do, just because I think it's important for people to understand where the climate doubt stuff is coming from. And so we have lots of stuff that we've tried to identify under the category of climate doubt, so that we're not telling people, yeah, this is right or this is correct, but we're also not hiding it. The real challenge is that the internet, any given story is replicated 100 different times somewhere on the internet in terms of the same story, the same factoid. I mean, we're just constantly repeating the same stuff over and over and over again, and we're trying to not do that in the Climate Web. So you'll find several news stories about the same topic, sure, but you won't find 85 news stories about literally the same report. Totally unnecessary, and that's why we curate it.
Great. Well, I think we covered most. Well, there's a few other comments coming in. Matt, is there anything, any other questions that in kind of chatting and watching that maybe we haven't covered? And
Well, I
just to let
wanted to,
everyone
yeah.
know, there will be a recording of this event sent out to all of you. So we'll send that. We'll send the links to the Climate Web Brain, as well as, Mark has a Twitter handle and any content we want there. And maybe, and like I said, you feel free to write into support right now if you need more instructions on how to get to the chat component. I do want to distinguish our support on the software from Climate Web. So if you have a direct question like, how do I get started with AI, chat into our website or write to us. And then, as far as reaching out to Mark on Climate Web, we will definitely provide that information. But then any other final questions, Matt, that we did not cover? And I'm sorry if we didn't get to all, but we're kind of running out of time, but maybe
right. I just wanted to share with Mark.
Few more.
Yeah, a lot of compliments and some people just sharing links that they want to share with you, Mark. And just let everyone know that we'll be passing those along to Mark, so he'll be able to see an output.
Yes,
of
have you looked at Ben Schneider's book, Human-Centered AI, Google Scholar Search, and
There's
a few other
links
things.
in there,
Yeah, a nice dialogue. You can also find Mark on the Brain discussion boards too. And on Twitter, so we can keep the conversation going.
And LinkedIn.
I think with that, yes, LinkedIn
and
as
LinkedIn.
well. So yeah, we can, if you want to pull anything up now for contact in your brain, I think you have a thought, you can. Otherwise, we will send that. But Mark, any final words of wisdom or anything that you'd like to leave the attendees with before we end our session today?
No, I would urge, as Shelley said at the beginning, I'm unaware of anyone else trying to build this kind of a tool for other wicked problems, of which there are quite a few. And I would really, one of the things, don't think that this is sort of the way that we originally started to design it. One of the beauties of the software is that we have probably totally reorganized the climate web a dozen times in a dozen years, because we've simply realized, oh, there's a better way to do this. And because of the way the software is set up, it's easy to reorganize, far easier than almost any other platform out there. So, I really would urge people to download the free version of the Brain software and just start using it for your own stuff, and then see where it takes you. And if you're interested in sort of wicked problem thinking, I'd love to talk about how you might organize it to tackle some of these big issues that E.O. Wilson was talking about.
Awesome.
Thanks for attending.
Yes, thank you everyone for attending. And Mark, thank you so much for sharing, first of all, your brain publicly on this wicked problem, and doing the world a service by getting a completely curated and comprehensive view of something that is clearly affecting all of us, and also these little tips on how we get started. And all your time today. So thanks so much. And maybe we'll do a follow-up and see how this evolves as far as your climate brain. There was one more question. What's the future of the Climate Web Brain? Where do you think it's going? Any new sections in development, or any new plans that you want to let us in on?
The one really important point is that the changes in the Brain software itself in the last few months have made the climate web radically easier to use than it was earlier in terms of online sort of public access. And so we're still adapting to that. And the climate web ebooks that I pointed to are an example. And we're going to be using the tour feature a lot. And that's brand new. So we've barely started.
That's a great one. That's a great feature.
Yeah, so we're just going to continue trying to figure out how do you make this kind of information more actionable for individuals? How do we get individuals playing climate chess, which is really what we need to be doing to tackle climate change.
Right, and I think on that we're going to close the session again. Thank you to everyone, and Dr. Mark Trexler. Hope to see you all in a future Brain Technologies event. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.